The Honourable the Speaker.
Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this house here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen. Amen. Namaste.
Oath or affirmation, announcements by the Speaker.
Honourable members, Mr. Fazal Karim, MP, member for Chaguanas East, has requested leave of absence from today's sitting of the House. The leave which the members seek is granted.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers.
The Minister of Finance.
Very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay paper number 1, the audited financial statements of the National Maintenance, Training and Security Company Limited for the year ended December 31st, 2017. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that paper 1 be referred to the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee. Thank you very kindly.
Honourable members, the question is that paper 1 be referred to the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the following papers. Papers 2 to 5, the responses of the 8th report of the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Equality and Diversity on an examination of the perceived inequality faced by single fathers in Trinidad and Tobago, with specific focus on custody matters, policies, and access to programs and services. The responses are from the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, and the Personnel Department. Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker.
Attorney General.
Madam Speaker, I have the pleasure of laying on the table the following papers: the Criminal Procedure Amendment number 2 Rules 2018 and the Civil Proceedings Amendment Rules 2018.
Reports from committees.
Member for Karen East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have the honor to present the following reports. Number 1, the 14th report of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee into the examination of the audited accounts, balance sheet, and other financial statements of the National Commission for Self-Help Limited for the financial years 2008 to 2015. Report number 2, the 15th report of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee into the examination of the audited accounts, balance sheet, and other financial statements of the Youth Training and Employment Partnership Program for the financial years 2008 to 2014. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Prime Minister's questions, urgent questions.
Member for Karen East Central.
To the Honourable Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, could the Could the minister indicate whether he was returning from travel abroad when the recent incident involving himself and the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago security officer occurred?
Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Thank you very much. There was no incident per se between any Airports Authority guard and myself at the airport, Piarco, recently. I would assist the honorable member from Karuni Central by offering information that hopefully would be useful. On the 20th of September, I, as part of a national delegation, returned from Guyana on the occasion of the signature of a memorandum of understanding between Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago. So I did return and transited through the airport on that date.
Yes. Would you be able to say the reason why you were approached by the security officer when you were in process, while you were walking in the compounds of the Airport Authority?
Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Madam Chair, I'll be liberal in offering more information. We returned from Guyana, and is the normal custom. Protocol officers would have extended courtesies to members of the delegation, inclusive of processing the members of the delegation through immigration. Subsequently, we were guided through the airport as is usual, and through the customs area, all the while following the protocol officers who would have had the documents and did the processing, and guided to this gate as would have been the normal practice. And all of that forms an integral part of courtesies extended to us. No different, and indeed in a much more pronounced fashion in my recent travels, as recently as last month, in facilities, airport terminals in other jurisdictions. I trust that this expansive response would help you.
Supplemental.
Were you in any way seeking to avoid customs, Minister?
Oh. The answer is patently, categorically, unambiguously no. I was merely guided, protocol-wise, followed as I would have done habitually. Please, the gentleman,
Honorable members of particular. Honorable members, a particular question was asked of the minister, and he's seeking to respond. I would like to hear his answer. You have 1 more minute. Yes, Minister. Continue.
1 more minute. I would entertain all questions.
No. In terms. All members of this House know that we are under urgent questions, and only 2 questions are allowed. So that if the minister has completed his answer, then it means that we move on to the next urgent question. Member for Oropouche West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Works and Transport, with regard to reports indicating that the galleon's passage double-backed upon completing half its journey to Tobago, could the Minister outline the circumstances which resulted in the vessel not completing its journey as
Minister of Works and Transport.
Madam Speaker, on Wednesday, the 5th December 2018, the galleon passage due to rough sea condition, changed its course en route to Scarborough and returned to Port of Spain. Sea conditions were recorded at 3.5 meters when the average measurement is usually 1.5 meter. During the unfortunate sea conditions, 2 panels on the car deck became dislodged. In the interest of safety, the captain decided to return to Port of Spain to have the panel system fixed. This was successfully addressed and sealing resumed as scheduled on Thursday, 6 December 2018. Thank you.
Question, Member for Orupuchi.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you. Could I ask the Honourable Minister if he is at all concerned by statements by officials of the Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce that vessel, the Galleon Passage, is unfit for purpose as a result not only of its frequent breakdowns?
Minister of Works and
Thank
Transport.
you. Madam Speaker, the Tobago Chamber of Commerce is not the certifying body for the safety of vessels. We are guided by the Maritime Service Division and the international brokers, Lloyd's, and they have guaranteed the safety of the vessel. I thank you.
Thank you. Minister, you mentioned earlier about the panels. Could you give more details as to what panel is this, where is it located, and how did it fall down?
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, my information is this is 2 sealing panels that got dislodged with the severe sea conditions, and they were repaired in-house at the Port Authority. Thank you.
Let the tarpaulin fall down.
Questions on notice? Questions for oral answer?
Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there are 3 questions for oral answer. We'll be answering all 3. Madam Speaker, there are no questions for written answer.
Member for Orupuchi West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 7 to the Minister of Trade and Industry.
Minister of Trade and Industry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To part A of the question, criteria used to assess the Moruga Hill Rise project. Market research, the degree to which surveys, polling, interviews, competitor analysis, and market testing are done. Local management, that is local input, search undertaken for local competence, transfer of knowledge, owner management of the company. Business competence, that is the education, the experience, the team expertise and cohesion, past success in a related field, the systems, the procedures and policies, business sustainability and continuity. The strategic plan, fit, how the project aligns with the strategic direction of the business. The market plan, including the marketing plan, the organization structure, inward and outward supply, logistics, production capacity, and reliability of raw material supply, human and technical resources. The financial viability, that is the cash flow projections, the sensitivity analysis, strength of assumptions. The degree of innovation, which is the newness of the market, the value added, the product service differentiation, the significance of product process improvements, the costing basis for internal research and development, the impact on local economy, which is the foreign exchange earnings, the unemployment, the business revenue growth, and the export potential, which is the size of the market, the barriers to entry, and the export capacity. With regard to part B of your question, for fiscal 2018, 5 applications were considered, and of those 5, 3 were approved. Of those 3, 1 grant was dispersed.
Putres.
Honourable Minister, what is the sum of money given under that 1 grant?
Are you speaking to the...
For the Moruga research.
Okay, the approved amount was 317,500. It has not yet been disbursed, but it has been approved. There's an agreement, but additional information has to be provided before disbursement.
Supplemental member for Orupuchi West.
Honourable Minister, why would a sum of 317,000 be granted, I believe it's for a private citizen, to do R&D, research and development, when there is a research and development section or department in the University of the West Indies at Kadi Sugarcane Feed Center? Why would a private person given that purview to do R&D?
Research and development cannot be done only through Cardi, Creary, and the University of West Indies institutions. They would be stymied. We're about making progress and assisting companies in progressing their different organizations. This one in particular is export-oriented. It's also the development of the agricultural sector. The product, if I could tell you, is one that will satisfy a niche market. So you can't confine research and development only to institutions. You will not be keeping pace with the pace of development out there in terms of R&D and product development and etc. We have to be in tandem with the international market, and therefore you have to work with companies. Research and development is key to innovation and development of products and development of our exports.
Member for Old Bushra. Supplemental.
Yeah. What was the criteria used for that particular person to be granted that? What was the criteria? I am asking for that one grant.
Member, I think you have already asked in respect to the criteria for selection. I think that is part of your substantial question. I would not allow that.
Yes. Yeah,
Supplemental?
What is the name of the company or person?
Minister of Trade and Industry.
The application was made in the name of Caribbean Sea and Air Marketing Limited.
Question number 8, member for Oropouche West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 8 to the Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Low Zero Food Crop Project comprises approximately 270 hectares with 149 plots divided in 3 phases. The August 2nd, 2018 earthquake damaged a section of Phase 1. Madam Speaker, with respect to Part A, the Engineering Division of the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, in collaboration with other agencies, immediately began assessing the damage and identified work to be done for site rehabilitation. Damage include deep land settlement caused by major disruption of certain sections of the roadway, actual movement of entire sections of the road off its original alignment, destruction of farm ponds, substantial movement of cultivated lands and farm plots, land movement affecting shed and yard, and land movement along the coastline. 9 farmers were affected. These farmers were Kashwar Basdeo, Balchan Singh, Danraj Saga, Ishwar Darka, Kumar Darka, Pramuti Samaru, Sunil Bal Singh, Lady Pierre, and Selwyn Karim. Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to advise that the entire project is now accessible by vehicles. Relocation of affected farmers to locations in close proximity remains an option, but it is conditional upon the expert advice sought from the University of the West Indies with respect to future stability of the site and upon the farmers ceasing all cultivation activity on the permanently affected plots. Madam Speaker, with respect to Part B, the government's objective is to mitigate immediate and long-term losses facing affected farmers. The ministry has done that by rendering immediate assistance to affected farmers. Rehabilitative works on affected plots commenced days after the earthquake and involved repair of the access roads, drainage systems, and leveling of the farmers' plots. These works have brought immediate relief to the farmers. Restoration of the ponds may be another form of assistance rendered to affected farmers. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Supplemental, member for Oropouche West.
Honourable Minister, I have been in contact with the Lucero Hillview Association farmers, and up to this morning, they have said that the access roads, is it then that the access roads, or are the access roads accessible to the farmers at this point in time, that is leading to their farms? To their farms. Why don't you comport yourself?
Member for Oropouche West, please. Member for Oropouche West. And all members. I will not allow that as a supplemental question. Member for Oropouche West.
Question number 9 to the Minister of Works and Transport.
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the question is the estimated time frame for the replacement of part by a private firm with respect to the Sea Bridge. Madam Speaker, in my contribution to the budget, and if you permit me to just quote from my that budget speech from the Hansard, Madam Speaker, this is something that in my opinion, I will be pushing very firmly for. The removal of the responsibility of the Sea Bridge from the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, placing it under a new company with a separate board. The new company will have the skill set required to have an efficient and effective and reliable sea bridge and an inter-island ferry sea transportation system. This new company will also be responsible for the water taxi traversing the San Fernando to Port of Spain route. Madam Speaker, there was no mention made of any private firm. So Part B, as I just mentioned, there's no mention of a private firm, therefore there was no selection process on which to report. I thank you.
Of the House on definite matters of urgent public importance.
Member for Naparima.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In accordance with Standing Order 17, I hereby seek leave to move the adjournment of the House for the purpose of discussing a definite matter of urgent public importance, namely, the failure of the government to address the worsening refugee crisis in Trinidad and Tobago. The matter is definite because it pertains specifically to the government's treatment of Venezuelan, Cuban, and other asylum seekers. The matter is urgent because there are no refugee laws at present, and there are claims that up to 60,000 Venezuelans may have already entered our borders. The matter is of public importance because it may pose a threat to this country's international standing with multinational agencies and may potentially overburden our economy.
Honorable members, I am not satisfied that this matter qualifies under this standing order. I advise that the member pursues this matter under Standing Order 16. Member for Point of Peer.
Madam Speaker, I hereby seek your leave to move the adjournment of this House today under Standing Order 17 for the purpose of discussing a definite matter of urgent public importance, namely the hasty, deliberate, and rushed actions of this government in seeking to dispose of the assets of Petrotrin, to handpick persons and entities without any transparency, accountability, or adherence to proper public procurement practices. The matter is definite because it pertains specifically to the actions of the government in disposing and seeking to dispose of the assets of Petrotrin. The matter is urgent because the actions of the government indicate an intention to dispose and dissipate the assets of Petrotrin with haste. The government has signaled its intention to dispose of the Petrotrin refinery within 30 days. The matter is of public importance because the assets of Petrotrin are part of our national patrimony, and the disposal of these assets without adherence to proper procurement practices will result in a loss to the people of Trinidad and Tobago that will be irreparable, immeasurable, and unsustainable. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honorable members, I am not satisfied that this matter qualifies under this standing order. I advise that the member pursues this matter under Standing Order 16.
Statements by ministers, personal explanations, introduction of bills. On the supplemental order paper, the miscellaneous provisions, proceeds of crime, anti-terrorism, and financial unit of Trinidad and Tobago Bill 2018 in the name of the Attorney General.
Honorable member, There's one more matter to be dealt with under this item, that is the Finance Bill 2018, and this item will be introduced later into these proceedings.
Motions relating to the business or sittings of the House and moved by a minister, public business, government business, bills, second reading.
Honorable members, the debate on the second reading of the following bill, which was adjourned on Friday, November 23, 2018, will be resumed. A bill entitled, An Act to Amend the Planning and Facilitation of Development Act 2014, and to consequentially amend the Environmental Management Act, Chapter 3505. Member for Dabidi O'Meara.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker. Thank you for this opportunity to contribute to this bill. It is the Planning and Facilitation of Development Amendment Bill 2018. Madam Speaker, the bill seeks to amend the Planning and Facilitation Development Act number 10 of 2014 and to consequently amend the Environmental Management Act, Chapter 3505. This act is meant to reform the town and country planning laws, a system for preparation and approval of national and subnational development plans, plan and development approvals. Madam Speaker, national development is dynamic, evolving, and an ongoing process. And the People National Movement, since our independence in 1962, took us from independence to republicanism, and now will be introducing us to local government reform. This act was passed in 2014 by a previous government to replace the Town and Country Planning Act. But before it can be proclaimed, we found it necessary to make certain amendments to the act. And this is all part of our plan to bring good governance to Trinidad and Tobago. As a state, as a nation develop, and as happened in the case of Trinidad and Tobago, we move from small to large, from micro to macro. And when we had simple towns, we now have cities like Port of Spain and San Fernando. We have boroughs, Arima Point, Fountain Chigonas, we have corporations, and we have the Tobago House of Assembly. And all these various forms require, for good governance, public officials to interact and make it work for the citizenry. So we must evolve and adapt. The present situation requires us to have public servants in the form of public officials, in the form of city engineers, town superintendents, engineering and surveying officers, building inspectors, some of whom are contracted. And they all operate out of the centralized offices in Port of Spain, with some sub-offices in Tobago and other cities. And not everything works well when you have this kind of centralization. And I'm sure that we have lots of stories about the problems that citizens face when dealing at local government level with a centralized system. I have in my constituency, constituents who complain about problems in terms of buildings. For instance, there's an area in Dabadi where, and it's called Millie Gardens, a hardware store has expanded. And as all things tend to expand, but it has expanded to the detriment of the citizens who live in Millie Gardens. So much so that the hardware was allowed to build a building right up to the curb, taking part of the boardwalk, part of the area that the citizens can access their homes. On the other side of the road, the hardware has expanded to put in panels and shelves holding steel overlooking the road. And the citizens would bring these matters to the attention of myself, to the matter of attention to the corporation, but to get action seems long drawn out because of the situation involving centralization of town and country. So we need reform. And this act puts certain provisions that we felt it necessary to tweak, to amend. And one area is the area of simple development. And the amendment that we are making to the term simple development is to reform, is to expand the meaning of simple development and taking it out of the clause in which it was placed, which is clause 9 in section 73, and to bring it into clause 3 of this bill and put it in part of the definition of simple development. And the simple development speaks about billboards, advertising signs, outline on the final planning, permission without certificate of environment, change of use, and it also involves residential or building developments 500 square meters up to land subdivisions of 20 plots. So we have tweaked and amended simple development in the bill. And the other area that we are using to tie in the simple development is to amend the National Planning Authority and the various committees that it is allowed to have. And the development control committees and other standing committees would be restructured so that they can better serve the citizenry. Because the idea is to transfer a lot of the centralized activities that takes place in planning and development in town and country and bring it down to the corporations so that the corporations can better administer their citizens and administer what goes on in the corporations. Because we must admit that what takes place in the cities of Port of Spain and San Fernando is a lot different than would take place in, for instance, Sandy Grande Regional Corporation or Tenapuna Piaco Separia Regional Corporation. And we need to move away from city planners and city engineers and bring a more commonality, a common appointment, common committees, and common public officials that can act and react to situation that is taking place at the local government level. So we are looking to tweak the development control committees and other standing committees. And the way we plan to do this is by making amendments to certain new appointments or change all existing appointments at the regional corporation and at the city level. So the Director of Planning, we will now have a Director of Planning in the corporations who will deal with the issues of small development, small buildings, as the case may be. And that is needed at the local government level, because the implications of development in one area doesn't really affect other areas. And the Director of Planning would be able to supervise what goes on in the regional corporations, the cities, and the boroughs, and the THA as well. It means that there will be employment available, because additional staff would have to be hired to carry out the process of applications and investigation of reports. So it would mean that instead of everything going to a centralized area, that the corporation, the boroughs, the cities, the THA would be able to deal with simple developments in their respective areas. But there would still be the National Planning Authority where, when it's necessary, matters can be sent up to the National Planning Authority, to the headquarters, as the case may be. So we're looking to introduce the Director of Planning. And there are other officials, like the enforcement officer, because one of the areas that we found need a lot of attention is complaints by citizens about housing, building of houses, addition to houses, as the case may be, that is not enforceable. The case of Millie Gardens comes to mind, where the citizens are crying out for someone to enforce the code, the building codes, that we believe and we know supposed to be necessary for the construction of buildings in communities. And we are aware, as we experienced a few months ago, that Trinidad and Tobago, part of the earthquake belt, and that from time to time we get a little shaking, that get a lot of us very religious and very prayerful in our whole attitude. But as Trinis, we respond, for instance, like having an earthquake party and so forth, after the fears have subsided and the shaking goes away. But I must say that Trinidad and Tobago survived a 6.9 earthquake recently, and I heard the Minister of Agriculture just speaking about our response of the government to the farmers, and the damage that I saw, for instance, that took place in Anchorage, Alaska, with a 7.0 earthquake. Trinidad and Tobago, really and truly, I see that we are doing some things right in terms of our building codes and so forth. And we like to enhance that. No. We like to enhance that by putting things in place. And that is what this government is about. This government is about good governance. And the good governance mean that when the other side pass a law that, I wouldn't say it's bad law, but that is not as we would like it to be, we in the PNM feel it is necessary for us to make amendments to those laws so that it can benefit the citizenry in a much more meaningful way. So we are making amendments to this bill. And we are also amending in terms of the qualifications for the various officers, Director of Planning, the Chief Enforcement Officer, etc., so that it becomes more accessible to the citizenry. And for instance, we are changing in terms of the qualifications so that more people at the postgraduate level would be the ones who require to have the necessary qualifications in planning and development and in terms of engineering and so forth. But at the postgraduate level, at the first degree level, they could have different core competencies, and then at the postgraduate level, then they can get the necessary qualifications. So we are broadening the scope so that, because a lot of students tend to go to university, tend to go to university and get their first degree, and then afterwards they realize that the job market is not as they would like, but now they have an opportunity to pursue their education and get the necessary qualification, then they can get into town and country planning and to get involved at the local government level, where they can work within their communities as the case may be. So we are looking after the citizens. We are looking after those who career path may need a little changing as we go along. The days when you become employed in a particular area and you spend your entire lifetime in that area, like myself, I spent 38 years in the military. The days of that seems to be changing, where people can change careers based on where they can take their family and where their job opportunities lie. So this is an opportunity for citizens to get into the area of housing and planning and engineering, as the case may be, postgraduate. When they have settled and they now can think in terms of how they are seeking their future. So we have taken a law passed by the other side in 2014, and we are amending it, bringing it more in line with the needs of today. We are bringing it in line with the opportunities available to our citizens so that they can develop their lives as the case may be. And at the same time answering the problems that we have in terms of buildings, in terms of construction, in terms of problems that we have with people who overextend the authority in terms of where they build structures and how they build structures and how it affects the citizens. So I am, Madam Speaker, I support these amendments to this bill. I think that they are needed, both at the level of the public officials, creating jobs, at the same time getting good law passed in this legislature. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
For Tabakit.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to join what I consider to be a very important debate, although it's a small bill in terms of the intention, which is to amend the planning and development of land and to repeal and replace the Town and Country Planning Act 3501. Madam Speaker, let me begin this afternoon by doing something that I think is necessary to be done, which is to declare my interest as a developer of land and housing in Trinidad. It's not something that I just started. I entered the construction business at age 18 in 1968. And it's a very long time. And I also would tell you that I'm a registered housing and land developer by letter from the HDC dated the 9th of March 2017. So I work within the confines of the law, and therefore I declare my interest in this way because for an important reason. You see, in this country, people very much misinterpret people's actions. But I'm an entrepreneur, and I believe in creating jobs, and I do on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, maybe put food on the tables of about 30 to 40 families. And I think that is important. Madam Speaker, in this House, of course, the member for Diego Martin Northeast is also known as a person in the construction sector, and I'm sure there are other persons in the Parliament like me. Some of the points, therefore, I'm about to make could be construed as self-serving, but you will see that they affect the construction sector and development in general and have a bearing upon the points I want to make with respect to these amendments. Madam Speaker, the construction sector is extremely important in this country for employment of our skilled and unskilled labor. But I think more importantly, with a demand for over 180,000 houses, as is touted by the HDC, there is a demand, therefore, for affordable housing to our people. And I will show in my contribution that it's important that the amendments made under simple development be further looked at in terms of ensuring that affordable housing comes about as a result of these amendments. Madam Speaker, everything, therefore, that can be done to positively impact upon the productivity of this sector will add value to the economy, the social environment, and the quality of life of our people in this country. It is unfortunate that the government is taking too long to implement this bill. This bill was first assented to, and parts of it, of course, implemented on the 1st of October 2014. That is 4 years and a couple of weeks, months and weeks since it was first assented. And, Madam Speaker, this speaks about something important that we need to talk about. When you have such an important bill and you bring it for amendment again, while you do not proclaim the other sections, you stand up as a government and you can be correctly accused of an implementation deficit. And the reality is that in so many areas of national life, the government has an implementation deficit. Madam Speaker, therefore, we are taking too long to implement this bill. One appreciates the need for amendments because time changed and we have to move on with amendments. But this bill was a major milestone in the legislative agenda of the People's Partnership Government, a major milestone. If you go back to our manifesto, you will see that it was one of the things that we promised, and it was a promise that we kept. And I want to congratulate Dr. Bo Tiwari, the Minister of Planning. And not only Dr. Tiwari, but the very good professionals at the Town and Country Planning Division and the Ministry of Plan who worked assiduously in order to ensure that this bill was brought to Parliament and actually passed and certain sections implemented during our term in office. Madam Speaker, I hope, therefore, after today, there will not be a lot of tarrying again with respect to this bill and that the other sections will be implemented in the shortest possible time, especially the section that deals with the empowerment of regional corporations, as the member for Dabadi O'Meara also spoke about, because I think it's important to bring government closer to the people and also to reduce the bureaucracy or debureaucratize what is happening in the country. But, Madam Speaker, permit me to look at the title of the bill, and the words in particular, facilitation, an act relating to the planning and development of land, and to replace it with the town and country. Planning and facilitation of development. Because I want to focus for a moment on the word facilitation of development and what it means. And when you look up the Oxford Dictionary, as my worthy political leader and opposition leader would often tell us, go to the dictionary, Oxford Dictionary, and see what it means. There, Madam Speaker, I saw that facilitation of development means to make easier or less difficult, help forward an action, a process, the act of making something easier or making something happen. I think that's important.
Implementation.
Making something happen. And we have not been making this bill happen as it should be happen. And I hope now that these amendments that we have brought here 4 years after this bill was first passed would actually make something happen that will affect and impact positively upon the lives of people and remove the kinds of frustrations that people are complaining about in the system. Madam Speaker, facilitation will therefore imply that the role of the official, and in this case the high government official, and in this case is the worthy member for Aruka Maloney, the Minister of Planning, will be to pave the way, to remove obstacles, to reduce bureaucracy for things to happen. To pave the way, remove obstacles, reduce bureaucracy for things to happen. And I'm afraid that this is not happening. We are hearing a lot of promises being made. For example, recently we heard about the computerization of the Town and Country Plan Development Division. We heard about applications that we will be able to make online and so on. A lot of promises. But Madam Speaker, in a time in the world when technology is advancing so quickly, and when in this country we have so many persons who I would dare say are technologically competent, why is it that it is taking us ages to get these online things going? If we want to really facilitate or make things happen. I read a long article in the newspaper of a town and country planning person speaking about online applications, but why is it not happening as it should happen? Madam Speaker, I said before in this House, and I say again, unless we as a people make what I like to describe as an instantaneous leap forward, we'll remain developing and never behave and be a developed country. We need to make a mental leap into behaving and acting as a developed nation, otherwise we'll remain a developing nation, a third world country. Madam Speaker, so that the facilitation of planning and development that Dr. Tiwari named this bill is important because there's a vision intended in the bill. Facilitate the development of land. Not just to frustrate the development of land, especially in a country in which people need houses. There are enough people living in very, very atrocious conditions in this country, Madam Speaker. So any amendments that are being proposed here today, particularly those that deal with simple developments and so on, should seek to make the process easier. That is the planning and development of land. Madam Speaker, let me begin with Clause 3. Clause 3 of the bill. And Clause 3 of the bill is where we are inserting a new definition of simple development. A new definition of simple development. And in this Clause 3, it refers to, in subsection D of the clause, 3D, it says here, land subdivisions, this is what is part of what's meant by simple development, land subdivisions, including engineering operations comprising less than 20 plots, provided that each plot falls within the range of 465 meters square and 800 meters square inclusive. For those of us who are not in metric system, 465, you multiply that by 10.76, you get about 5,000 square feet. And 800 square meters, you'll get about 8,000 square feet. So the properties must be between 5,000 and 8,000 square feet. Now, Madam Speaker, the first point I want to raise is 20, simple development. Is 20, maybe 20 is adequate, maybe the planners, maybe those who have studied the system would agree that 20 is adequate in terms of what you define as simple development. But Madam Speaker, when you look at 20 multiplied by 5,000, you get 100,000 square feet. And if you take 43,560 square feet as an acre, you are really looking at 2.29 acres, really, as a simple development. I would think that what you might really have wanted to do was to really look at not 2.29 acres, you probably want to look at about 5 acres, really, and make it about 5,000 square feet as simple development, as a simple development, and not 20. But there's a bigger point I want to make, Madam Speaker, the Central Statistical Office gave me some figures with respect to income levels in this country. And I was devastated to know that close to 75% of our people, according to statistics, earn less than $6,000 a month. Madam Speaker, that is a very serious statistic. Under $6,000 a month. So if a bank gives you 40% of your gross income as a repayment on a mortgage, it means to say that those people can only afford $2,400 a month to pay on a mortgage. And I will tell you something. If you look at, if you look at the very good program which we had put in place with TTMF, the 2% for up to $1 million. $1 million, if you borrow $1 million from TTMF at 2%, the repayment is $3,696, which will mean that you have to have a monthly income of $11,000. Madam Speaker, you know what people are being excluded, therefore, from a home-owning democracy in this country? Home ownership, the freedom to speak, the freedom to own a property, and the right to own a property. Madam Speaker, the right to good health, the right to an education. These are the fundamental pillars of a strong democracy. And when you have people who cannot own a property and call it their own, what you are doing is you are marginalizing people and you are frustrating the building of a strong democracy in the country. Madam Speaker. And therefore, I want to make a plea in this regard for a revision of the simple development member for Aroka Maloney in this regard, that you look at lots of 3,500 square feet. And if you look at lots of 3,500 square feet, and if you examine the regulations, and if I use town and country planning regulations on an average and say 33 1/3% of that could be used for building space, it means to say that you can still get on a 70 by 50 plot, 70 long by 50 wide, 3,500 square feet, you can still get a house of about 1,150 square feet, which is a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, living, dining room, kitchen, and porch. Simple house, you can get that. Or you can go 2 levels and get it 550 each and still satisfy that. So what you will then do is you will bring more people on the smaller portion of land, because land is the big cost, not the building. Land is the big cost. And you can bring more people on a 3,500 square foot lot of land, and therefore bring more people into the home-owning democracy that you want to build. If you relook and rethink this matter of the simple development. You see, in my view, the way Town and Country grants approvals now for 3,500 square feet lots is skewed. I know of only 2, maybe there are more, but I know of only 2 big developers who have benefited. Caribbean Housing in Central Trinidad have gotten approvals in Chaguanas for houses on 3,500 square feet. In Tanapuna, you have another developer there in East Trinidad who has houses again on 3,500 square feet. I inquired as to how they have gotten it and other people, because I don't know of any in South, and I'm told it's site-specific. And once you begin to talk about site-specific, and you see it in East and Central, and the big developers, they are the ones are benefiting. They are the ones who are able to tweet and to twist the arms of the system. What about the small developers who should also be able to get that and get more people into their homes? Because, Madam Speaker, the poverty in South Trinidad, for example, and the member for Point Fortin is not here, But the poverty coming from Point Fortin to Labrador, Otaheite, into Woodland, into all those areas is really, really high. And those are where that's the areas where you need to put people into homes and to give them a start in life. And I am therefore saying to review the simple development definition so that you allow, in terms of, you allow for 40 houses, maybe on your 465 or what have you, 40 plots for simple development, but you allow, Madam Minister, through you, Madam Speaker, you allow for about 60 of the 3,500 square foot plots of land, so more people. And this is not something new. In Twin City, they had allowed small developments way back into the 70s. Yeah, on Diamond Vale and so on. Let us have some of this in South Trinidad, because I'll tell you why. When you look at the town and country planning, number of plans submitted to town and country in the last 5 years, it tells an interesting story. I have statistics here which I want to thank the Office of the Member of Parliament for Aruka Maloney and the Minister of Planning. Very, very courteous people there assisting me. I want to put on record the courtesy of the Permanent Secretary in getting these statistics to me. They actually called me back to say the statistics were available and what have you. What is interesting? No, I think when a public servant performs, one should come in this house and say so. And when a public servant doesn't perform, we should also have the courage to come and say so also. Because institutional collapse in this country is very bad unless we put the institutions right in this country, which this government on this side in return to office will have to do. Yes. Because institutional collapse is one of the problems we have in the society of productivity and performance. Well said. Madam Speaker, if you look carefully at what happened, in 2014, applications for houses peaked at 8,915. But then, from 2016, it dropped to 8,146, 800 less applications, and then dropped in 2017 by a further 800 applications. And then in 2018, so far, it has dropped by 900 applications. What is happening with people desire to build a house? How come there's such a big drop in the applications, and especially in South Trinidad? In South Trinidad, in 2014, it peaked at 3,763, but by 2017, annually, it had gone down to 2,637. 1,100 less than 2014. Wow. That is saying something about what is happening in the economy. And therefore, in terms of these amendments, that's why I talk about facilitation. Not to frustrate, but we must do things. Something is happening in this economy that if the number of plans people are submitting have fallen so dramatically, it means to say that the economy is going to be affected, the hardwares are going to be affected, the skilled workers are going to be affected, everybody is going to be affected. And therefore, if it is that this is happening and people are getting poorer, we need therefore to look at how we frame laws in order to suit our people also, and not to marginalize them and not to leave them out of the democracy, the homeowning democracy, Madam Speaker. So, town and country approvals, you have to look at it carefully in terms of what is happening with the statistics, and I think that is important. Madam Speaker, it means therefore that you have, Madam Minister, through you, Madam Speaker, I'm asking you to look at this again, to rethink it. I think we have to help poorer people. Madam Speaker, the next point I want to make, it has to do with Section 3 again. A, billboards or advertising signs. Madam Speaker, which billboard signs are we talking about here? Our highways are littered with billboards all over. They are in the local government roads, they are on the highways, etc. And there has always been an issue as to whether the Ministry of Works or the Ministry of Local Government is responsible for giving the approvals, or whether Town and Country is supposed to give Ministry of Planning the approval. But the thing is that a lot of these billboards are illegal on the highway. And not only illegal, because they're also illegal, nobody looks at the quality of the structures. So sometimes the wind blows and blows down the structure, and sometimes those structures fall on the edge of the roadway. And it's dangerous. Therefore, in terms of your building inspector, there's an amendment here with your building, chief building officer who establishes inspection procedures and so on. It will be important to do that. But right now, the problem is we are not enforcing anything. We are only dabbling in a set of conversation on who's responsible and who is not responsible. You don't run a society like that. You don't do that. You don't do that. When you allow people to break small laws, they will break big laws. They will break big laws. I show you an example, Madam Speaker, just allow me. Right at the corner of Barry Crescent and Ramsaran Street in Chaguanas, they've allowed a coconut vendor to put a booth at the corner. At the corner, right? Stopping all the traffic. Right? There are parking signs. I have written to the Superintendent of Police in Chaguanas on 5 occasions, and they have not moved to move one vehicle under where there are clear no parking signs. So it's not surprising that we are not enforcing anything about these illegal structures on the highway. How many of these structures have town and country approval, therefore? How many are meeting the standards? Madam Speaker, the other matter here is 3C, change of use, residential or building developments, or any additions thereto, where the cumulative floor area with additions and so on does not exceed a gross floor area of 5,000 meters or about 5,500 square feet on the average. Madam Speaker, what does this really refer to, this clause 3C, change of use? Does this refer just to change of use of buildings, let's say residential to commercial or commercial to residential? What about lands? What about change of use of land? Let's say from agriculture to residential. How is this doing? You see, I don't want to make an accusation for an accusation's sake. But Madam Speaker, I'm beginning to come very close to a belief that there are people who are in charge of policy making in town and country, probably actually frustrating the development of housing in this country by how they're approaching giving approval. It might very well be that is happening. Because big people are getting. The whole of the Endeavour estate was agricultural land in Chaguanas. And Caribbean Housing is able to get all the approvals. But there are other people in this country who can't get approvals.
He's a financier.
You can't get approvals to Mr. San Fernando West. You are also a developer, right?
We didn't know that.
So it's important that we ask this. Is there a deliberate attempt to frustrate certain sections in the country from development, especially rural Trinidad and Tobago? Madam Speaker, so I asked that. To what does that refer, Madam Minister, through you, Madam Speaker? Is it just residential properties, or does change of refer to land and what have you? And then we go to section 11.2. 11, section 11.2, B, amended. And here we talk about the addition of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Local Government Authorities, as well as the ministry responsibility for physical planning, that they are being added into the list, and you're removing also two names, and you're adding 2 names. You're adding 2, and you're removing 2. You're removing the Occupational Safety and Health Agency and the Chief Medical Officer in the Ministry's responsibility for health, and you're adding here the ministry, a representative from the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Local Government Authorities, and someone from the Ministry responsibility for planning and development. And they are being added to what is called the Development Control Committee. Development Control Committee. Now, the Development Control Committee is a very important part of this bill. Now, let me just say, I think it's a welcome development to add the Association of Local Government Authorities, because the Development Control Committee has important functions delegated to it by the National Planning Authority. And a lot of what the National Planning Authority will need input from somebody, Ekora, with local government. and with local government areas and local government problems. And I think this is good. But there's something important. You see, before we do that, let me just make clear what this Development Control Committee does. It coordinates and expedites development approval plans. That's important. It coordinates and expedites. And secondly, grants final approval and render binding advice on behalf of the National Planning Authority and the agencies and offices referred to in subsection 2B. Madam Speaker, there are certain issues that I want to raise with respect to this. One, the local government representative here, coming from the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Local Government Authorities, there could be a problem. It could be the wrong person. You know what happens in the Association of Local Government Authorities right now? He who wins the most seats in the local government elections controls the executive of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Local Government Authorities. And you might get somewhat put in there for tokenism, as happens now. And therefore, they can then decide to put somebody. And, how do we ensure that we get somebody from local government who is really able to contribute in a very significant and important way to the deliberations of the Development Planning Committee and not end up with a compromise representative? Because to me, this representative is a watchdog of local government corporations. Madam Speaker, so because I want to point something else out to the Honourable, to you, Madam Speaker. When this bill was first passed in 2014, the idea was to set up some offices in order to test the process. Right, Dr. Tiwari? In Chaguanas, for example, and yes, pilot projects. Well, Madam Speaker, on August 21st, 2015, the Town and Country Planning Division wrote the Chaguanas Borough Corporation CEO and indicated that they are seeking to initiate a pilot progress in Chaguanas and so on and so forth, and they wanted to get on with it. 4 years have gone, and nothing has happened. And there's correspondence up to the 3rd of September 2018 between the Mayor of Chaguanas, Mayor Gopal Budan, and the Honorable Camille Robinson Regis, where the Mayor is again inquiring as to the current status of the project and whether the simple planning applications and building approvals, that pilot project will be set up in Chaguanas. I don't have a response from the Minister's office to that particular letter. But I want to urge, in order to reduce this implementation deficit, I want to urge the Honourable Minister that you move to set up some pilot projects in this regard. It will be one way of fast forward, and also, in my view, your local government reform, which was part of what Dr. Tiwari and us in the People's Partnership had intended, that you don't have to do the whole reform. You could do pieces of the reform, but you could get effective reform going in the country that affects the quality of life of people. Madam Speaker, the thing is that the Development Control Committee, as I said, is an important committee, and it coordinates and expedites the development approval process. And the part I'm interested in is the expediting of the development approval process. Because if you do not have this Development Control Committee meeting very regularly, you are going to have a backlog of applications. And the Honourable Minister will tell you that it takes a very long time now to even get to the committee, if you raise an objection, to have it heard. I have appeared before that committee on several occasions, and right now I'm waiting for a period of about 8 months to get an appointment. And I cannot get the appointment on behalf of one of my constituents. Madam Speaker, we have to, a lot of things. This Development Control Committee, on which this local government person is sitting, I'll show you how important it is. In Tabakit, there's a pastor, very hard-working pastor, Pastor Basdio. Everyone knows this. Pastor Basdeo applied for subdivision of 16 acres of land.
Your time is now spent. You're entitled to 15 more minutes if you wish to complete your presentation.
Thank you, Ancil. And he applied to subdivide 16 acres, and they gave him 16 homesteads of 1 acre each, in an area of the country which has one of the lowest per capita income of people among agricultural people, where people can't afford to buy a homestead, and where they want to buy a small plot of land and build a small house. So do you see how important this thing is? I went before the committee, and then the committee relented and gave him 5 acres, a smaller plot. If he didn't have an MP who would have been able to do that for him and go and make the representations, what would have happened, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, the process could be very convoluted. And it's one thing to talk about simple developments and the town and country planning, the National Planning Authority giving authority to the municipal corporations, as is there in the Act, in order to approve simple developments and what have you, but to get it done. Madam Speaker, listen to what happens. You send an application to Town and Country Planning. Town and Country Plan has a notice on their boards if you go to Sanford, where it says they have 2 months statutory, and boy, they take the 2 months. So first thing, you're taking 2 months before you get that plan moving from Town and Country back to the regional corporation. If the regional corporation doesn't go to pick up the plans stay there. Then, when regional corporation get it, they send it to CMOH. That's a different story. That's a different story. It could take up to 6 months. But I must say, I have looked through, I have been examining when a plan reaches CMOH, how long it takes to come. And the ones that are really difficult are the ones that have problems, and the people don't go in to make the changes. But generally, they keep within another 2 months, maximum 3 months. Then from CMOH, it comes back to the building inspector at the regional corporation. Then, if there are complications, it has to go to the Minister of Works. It has to go to the Drainage Division. Then it comes back again to the regional corporation, to the building inspector. Then it goes to the council health meeting. Singapore. Then it goes to the council statutory meeting. Singapore. Then it's signed by the CEO. If you could find the CEO and call him and say, boy, can you come in and sign this paper for me? That could take 6 months. 6 months before the plan passed, Madam Speaker. How are we going to reduce and compress this time if you really want to get construction of houses going?
Bring in Singapore.
Exactly. But what I'm saying, I'm arguing a case here for, debureaucratization and getting the process going, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, so is this process, for example, going to continue, or are we going to reform this process as part of the simple development? I can see real good coming out of a well-functioning development control committee, provided it's functional, provided people come out who are appointed to have a quorum, or they don't sit there when you go 9 o'clock and you sit in there, someone waiting, and they say, well, we don't have a quorum yet because people have come. That is happening right now in Town and Country with the committee when you make an objection. When you make an objection, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as we speak about simple developments, therefore, I want to ask the Honourable Minister, in 2016, when the Minister of Finance spoke, he reinforced something that was done by Dr. Tiwari in one of his previous budgets, and which we had approved, which is the building of multifamily units on 5,000 square feet of land. And I remember the Honourable Prime Minister talking about the Tabikit initiative and saying, I had made certain propositions. I'm very happy to do it, because I then again made the statement about poor people not being able to own a house. Right? Madam Speaker, 2016, 2017, 2018, nothing has happened to change the regulations of Town and Country Planning in order to get that budgetary proposal effected. Nothing. Maybe not the minister's fault. The minister assures me that she has been asking them in the Town and Country to do it, but they have not done it. So that is it the errant public servant, or is it the errant minister that is not really managing in the way to get action and to get the process going?
For Tabakita, I understand the general gist, but again, I think you're going off on a tangent,
Sure.
and I'll really ask you to come back and show how whatever is here maybe relates to what now you're dealing with, please.
Sure, Madam Speaker. Sure. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, all I'm saying is that when you make amendments to a bill in terms of simple development, what you're trying to do is not frustrate, but you're able to facilitate. That is what I'm trying to say. Madam Speaker, Clause 6 amends Section 15 and has to do with the chief building officer and his functions and the chief enforcement officer. I'm happy to note that both positions and that of the CEO of the National Planning Authority is under the Integrity of Public Life Act. And that is very, very important. But the chief building inspector has certain important functions to perform. He establishes inspection procedures for building and engineering operations. Inspection procedures of what? What standards? Who sets the standards? Madam Speaker, because if he is establishing inspection procedures for the inspectors, who sets the standards? You see, the inspection procedures mean nothing, Who sets the standards? What are they inspecting? Where are those standards? And I have not seen anything that tells me that they're the standards. And why do I say that? You had an earthquake recently. And when you saw the collapse of an HDC house, you saw 4 pieces of steel and the steps separated from the house. Why is it that all those HDC houses have all these problems? Do we inspect them? And if the chief building inspector is establishing procedures, then for building and engineering operations, then what are those standards? What are those standards? Madam Speaker, I could go on to really talk about standards and how people in this country are fooled by what they purchase. But for example, if he sets standards, what standards is he setting for the inspector to look at when it comes to the quality of steel? I understand in the country, for example, a lot of steel from Turkey have been refused permission for landing in the country by the Standard Bureau. And I compliment the Standard Bureau for doing that. But what about the galvanized sheets that are coming out of China and India and so on? Are they being tested to see whether the stamping that they put on the sheets are consistent with the quality? Because all of that is important. So while we talk about the chief building inspector have inspection procedures, where are the standards? Where are the standards? Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the chief enforcement officer, who's also mentioned there, shall take action against breaches of building regulations referred to him by the chief building officer. Madam Speaker, there's never been a problem with laws in this country. It's enforcement. You have people dumping rubbish all over the place, but you have a litter act and you have litter wardens and nobody being carried to court. I will tell you something. When I was mayor of Chaguanas, people were prosecuted at the Chaguanas Magistrates Court. When you swear to do your job without fear of ever do it. And now everybody dumping all about, and we have a dirty country. So is the chief enforcement officer going to carry out his functions according to the law? It's good to have all these things marked here, No litter ward. But 4 years of implementation deficit. Are you going to have how long is it going to take to bring all this? When is this bill really going to become truly functional in this country? Because there's another matter I have to raise. It's the matter of regulations. Under Section 61 of the Act, the minister has the power to make regulations. Now, are we going to make a new set of regulations? And those regulations will have to be brought before the Parliament. How long are those regulations going to be made? Because the regulations will have a bearing upon what the chief enforcement officer does. It will have a bearing upon what the chief building officer does, have a bearing upon what the inspectors do, and so on. So what is going to happen, Madam Speaker, with all of that? I think it's important that we ask that. Which regulations are we going to continue with the existing regulations, or are we going to make new regulations and bring them into the Parliament? And if that is the case, what's going to happen? I want to make an appeal, Madam Minister, is for you to proclaim the section of the Act, which is the section of the Act that deals with local government, which given the powers to local government. And that is Section 16 of the Act. 16.2 and 17.1 and 2. Proclaim it. And let us get down with putting some of this power in the hands of local government even as not just as a pilot project. We have too much pilot projects in this country. And when it's a pilot project, it pilot and nothing happens again. Madam Speaker, nothing happens again. So I am all for what is happening here, right? But I am for implementation. Okay. I'm for it to make it happen, Madam Speaker. Well said. And I don't see with this piecemeal approach that we have here, whether this is going to happen in the way that's going to happen, unless you have what is referred to as KETA, in management terms, being effected at the Town and Country Planning Division to get this matter off the ground and to get the people there moving. I deal with Town and Country Planning on a weekly basis. And let me say, let me put on record that the people in South Trinidad are very courteous and they are very kind. They are very, I don't go to Diego Martin, so I don't know. Right, okay. And when I go to San Fernando, I want to tell you, those girls at the front desk, if you have a problem, they take your plan and look at it one time, your application. So you don't have to go back 5 times and say, you're missing this, can you go and get this? And they tell you one time. I think that's the kind of thing I want to compliment them about. But at the higher levels of town and country planning, I think you have some tin gods. I think you have some tin gods. And I think we got to deal with them. I think that some people are lifting themselves to pedestals of power that doesn't exist, and somebody have to kick the brick from under the pedestal and get something going. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, all of this can be down to the benefit of this country. But, Madam Speaker, I urge the government, they have right there, they are not getting the job done. It seemed that somebody said they were not ready. I hope that they will be ready sometime, maybe sometime 2027, Madam Speaker. But, Madam Speaker, I thank you again for the opportunity to contribute, and I hope that we can move in the right direction. Thank you.
Member for San Fernando West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, my learned colleague for Tabakit is a very energetic speaker. He also occupies quite commendably in his contributions an air of elder statesman. I mean that in the best way possible. Because he sounds very good. The ideas are esoteric, they are ideological, and, Madam Speaker, they reflect part of the equation. Most respectfully, in urging and in giving an exhortation about implementation, in asking the question as to whether it is an errant minister or an errant implementer in the public service, in focusing upon the fact of when something is going to will get going, the learned member has unfortunately left out the reality of the discussion. And the reality of the discussion is this law, partially proclaimed as it is, Act number 10 of 2014, this law which is intended to repeal the 1960 Town and Country Planning Laws, Chapter 3501, our laws currently standing as the 1947 English model. The honourable member, in asking about this law and extolling the virtues of this law, has left out the key articulating elements to work with the law. And the honourable member, in commending Dr. Tiwari, the honourable member for Caroni Central, on the passage of this bill, the honourable member went on to say that there has been a failure, effectively, to make a leap of development, as the honourable member put it. The honourable member said, when are we going to have a leap of development, that this country needs a leap of development? But, Madam Speaker, most respectfully, the honourable member has unfortunately not put the law in its operationalization into effect. And let's go directly to the law. In operationalizing Act number 10 of 2014, first of all, that act to be operationalized has to have certain key elements. And the key elements are inclusive of transfer of services by the government, agreements with local government, public sector integration, and systems integration. Let's translate that. Act number 10 of 2014 articulates alongside a philosophy of decentralization. It says, take your national planning authority, take your chief building inspector, convert it to an enforcement officer and a planning officer, have them operate with simple developments happening in the municipalities, complicated developments happening in the Town and Country Planning Replacement National Planning Agency, and then have those two entities, i.e. local government and central government, work together. Madam Speaker, forgive me, I forgot to declare my interest as well. I too, like the member for Tabakit, am heavily involved in development and have been for many years of my life. Many members of my family are equally involved in development, and I wish to declare my interest as Tabakit did. I forgot to. Madam Speaker, as is the Honorable Prime Minister, and if he speaks, he is too to give his development posits. So, Madam Speaker, let me come back to the point. Centralized system must work with local government. Local government as a concept finds itself in the bill. Local government as an articulating element finds itself in the act. And when Tabakit stands up and says that nothing has been implemented, Tabakit is forgetting to mention a few very important factors. Number one, local government reform must be a part of this discussion, not as a part of this debate, but in the context of the bill, the local government plug-in for the municipalities to treat with simple developments in the fashion that we intend in Clause 3 of this bill, it must be a part. But secondly, the revenue and the reliance of consistent streams of revenue for local government must also be had in this conversation. And therefore, it was remiss of Tabakit not to mention the facts which bring us to where we are with this bill today. Madam Speaker, in 1988, we had the Ministry of Planning and Mobilization engage in its consultations as to reform of our 1960 law. In 1995, we had the IDB-funded Agricultural Reform Program. 1996, extensive national consultations. In the years 1999, 2000, 2002, 2001 twice, because there were two bills produced. We had draft legislation put. But Madam Speaker, it really was the period 2009 to 2010 where local government reform as a planning regulatory aspect for simple development within Clause 3 of this bill came to the fore. But my learned colleagues, in coming up with this law, Act number 10 of 2014, have failed to mention that the only local government reform that the member for Siparia led off on was the Alderman Bill. That was it. The election runoff bill. And Madam Speaker, I see it in the context of not only the reply to Tabakit, but the articulation of Clause 3 here and simple development to say this, Madam Speaker. How does one implement this law, make the leap of implementation that Tabakit is asking for, if you don't have the people in the municipalities to do the work? This esoteric divorce from reality concept that we must just implement, and implementation is regulations, and implementation is more prescriptive law, Madam Speaker, misses the boat clean. And I'll tell you why, Madam Speaker. I'll tell you why. The member for Tabakit is well aware, as am I, that the municipalities require the manpower and the revenue to conduct simple development analysis. That's the crux of implementation. The honourable member knows, as he gave the example of the HCC homes in the earthquake and the separation of buildings, and is anybody inspecting, in the Chaguanas developments alone, there were 2 building inspectors for 15,000 pours of concrete. How do 2 building inspectors inspect 15,000 pours? Could Naparima be quiet, please, Madam Speaker? He's disturbing me.
Okay, I sure you could rise above that.
Madam Speaker, I'm trying, but my volume has to go too high to bury
All
him
right,
out.
I think now that you've stood, Naprima will control his volumes. I just remind everybody about Standing Order 53.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Constant droning. Madam Speaker, how do 2 building inspectors inspect 15,000 pours of concrete? And therefore, Madam Speaker, when Tabakit makes the exhortation that we must implement and that there must be a leap of development, are we guaranteed as a country in ensuring the implementation of this very good piece of legislation to make the leap that is required? Because the only leap that is required is the support of the opposition. And let me explain how. Madam Speaker, I've been speaking about the structural implementation for local government. That requires an amendment to the law. The local government reform and the amendments which this government will bring to Parliament very shortly, which was put upon a hiatus in the context of simple development.
Okay,
There's no bill, Madam Speaker.
yeah, but
I'm not
please, I'm not
anticipating.
going to let you go into local government reform as a big issue. Just please keep within this.
I'm guided. Madam Speaker, in clause 3 of the bill for simple development, where we are treating with the municipalities to do the work, it is important in answering the Honourable Member for Tabakit to bear in mind that the capacity to do it, and Tabakit's direct words about making a leap of development, I'm saying requires one to articulate to the consequential amendments that this bill asks for. So, Madam Speaker, I'm speaking about the bill. And in speaking about the bill, the support of the opposition for implementation is critical. And Madam Speaker, let me put on the record here. It was a special select committee of the Senate alone, which I sat on, Madam Speaker, in 2014, together with the following members. The Honourable Dr. Surujrattan Tiwari was the chairman. Ms. Marlene Cudjoe, the Honourable Mr. Ganga Singh, myself, Faris Al-Rawi, and Dr. Rolf Balgobin. The 5 of us sitting in a special select committee alone across 12 meetings made hundreds of amendments to the bill, which we are now, to the act which we are now seeking to amend to this bill. And in talking about the leap of faith and the leap of implementation, I'm demonstrating to you now that a special select committee formed with opposition support, and I myself as Dr. Tiwari would be witness of, Caroni Central would be witness for, put in hundreds of amendments to this piece of legislation. That's what's required to improve the law. But Madam Speaker, when Tabakit asks about implementation, I have to ask, are you prepared to help to implement? Because Madam Speaker, in coming to the building inspectors and the amendments to the chief building officer that this bill proposes and the manpower resources required, Madam Speaker, the revenue stream has to be in place. And therefore, Madam Speaker, one is automatically drawn to the Revenue Authority and property tax input into the amendments that this bill has. And if one wants to implement, and if Tabakit is to be the advocate for the opposition, are they prepared to support that, Madam Speaker? So that Trinidad and Tobago can actually be Trinidad equal to Tobago in a THA modeling type of equation, where the THA can collect and keep its own revenue for local government development for municipalities within the clause 3 context of this bill, where simple developments have to be managed by the municipalities. So when I hear the criticisms and anchoring for debate in the fact this government allegedly does not implement, how do you implement without a revenue stream? How do you implement? Tabakit made a point. Tabakit said this: what happened in causing a 1,100 reduction in applications at town and country planning? That's what Tabakit said. And Doppy, the member for Naparima, says, I apologize, I withdraw. Madam Speaker, in treating with the drop in applications of 1,100 in the period 2014 to 2017, and in answering the Honourable Member, Madam Speaker, we didn't have a 96% loss in revenue on one of the most important legs in our country? Wasn't that as a direct consequence of ridiculously bad decisions on the part of the last government in failing to protect our patrimony in the oil and gas sector contribution to our economy? Madam Speaker, that is the clear answer to the 1,100 drop in applications at the Town and Country Planning Division. And if that is the case, how then does my learned friend, the member for Tabaquite, ask a question like that? Obviously, the number of building applications are correlation to the state of the economy. And actually, Tabaquite has just said something, Madam Speaker, which is very important. There are a number of people building in cash. And that is in fact true because the Financial Intelligence Unit has spotted $22.5 billion worth of suspicious activity. Madam Speaker, let me put that into the context of reality. The contribution of oil and gas, which we boast about, to support our country, that is on average 30.
Write my family name on a paper. You have any family?
So I want to assure the member for Naparima and the member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, that as soon as they indicate they wish to join the debate in the proper manner, I will entertain them. In the meantime, I would like them both to observe Standing Order 53 so that I can hear the Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I was saying, Tabaquite is right. People build in cash. In my view, that's a problem. And I was saying that the FIU has recognized that problem to the tune in 1 year of $22.5 billion. And I was putting it into the context of Trinidad and Tobago boasts that we have an oil and gas economy. The annual contribution from oil and gas to our revenue each year is roughly about $30 billion. The $22.5 billion in suspicious transactions is near equal to the oil and gas contribution in this economy. But Madam Speaker, suspicious activities and suspicious transactions are a percentage of reporting because it's only financial institutions and listed businesses pursuant to the Proceeds of Crime Act that report. So the figure of suspicious transactions and cash is therefore more likely higher than 22.5 billion, therefore certainly almost at least equal to double oil and gas revenue. And Madam Speaker, I think the Honourable Member for Tabaquite is right in making that leap of faith, in making that leap of development. Madam Speaker, you have to improve the systems. And Madam Speaker, in answering Tabaquite in his contribution, I'm able to say that is why we have dedicated the amendments in this bill as part of the equation. The part of the equation is the simplification of tasks. The part of the equation is making sure that the Environmental Commission, for instance, receives the appellate work that it ought to do because it is under capacity in terms of its workload. The part of the submission is making sure that the definitional section of simple development, both in two clauses of the bill, is married up, one by way of deletion and other by way of improvement. But Madam Speaker, the articulating aspects that this government is engaged in include the other legs. The revenue stream, which is a revenue authority and property tax contribution, so that you can keep and spend what you have. And secondly, the capacity building by local government. So Madam Speaker, this is very much, and I understand Tabaquite's exhortation. When you're hungry and you want food and your stomach is burning, you're not asking if you bought the chicken yet, if you put it to cook, if you cook the peas and rice, you're just hungry. But Madam Speaker, when the last government gives us a recommendation to say, look, passing this law and trying to implement it alone is the thing, you can't say that if you didn't do the local government, revenue management, and statistical information as the bills that we have in our parliament demonstrate. So, Madam Speaker, this is no easy position to manage. Tabaquite mentioned something else as well in terms of implementation. Thank you. I wasn't going to speak on it was only when you did. So, Madam Speaker, Tabakit, in his very energetic speech, and I thank him for provoking me to contribute today, went on about something called online applications, and I agree 100% with online applications. It feeds into ease of doing business, etc. But what's the point of an online application when you can't pay for the online application online? So you fill out, much like your company's registry, you fill out everything on the e-portal, you fill out the forms, but you can't pull the trigger till you walk down to the registry and pay them in cash.
Same thing with work permits.
Same thing for work permits, same things for court documents, same things for town and country planning applications. But in making the leap, Madam Speaker, why would the UNC block the e-payments in the court pay bill?
No cash.
If you are making that recommendation, how do I judge the UNC in blocking legislation to say no e-payments in Trinidad and Tobago? Worse yet, Madam Speaker, in the period of implementation of the Electronic Transactions Act, which was passed in 2011, in the amendments made to the Exchequer and Audit Act and in the regulations in 2015, we had a full 4 years of the UNC doing sweet nothing with e-payments, and today we hear Tabakit say, let's do e-filing. So I'm going to ask the question in this debate that we're having. Will you support the legislation to improve that? Or there's no legislation currently in Parliament, don't get frightened, point up here, learn the rules. So Madam Speaker, my question is in making this leap of development as Tabakit has given us quite properly. Yes, I like it. The question is, will you support it? Or will you agree on the one hand that you will support certain things, you will agree unanimously in another place that you will agree, and then you come to the floor of the Parliament and say, hard luck. Let's talk some more. Let's go back to committee. Let's have no joint select committee, special select committee. We must have joint select committee. This bill, Madam Speaker, this bill, 4th session of the 10th Parliament, special select committee of the Senate to consider this act that we're proposing to amend, that Chaguanas West and I sat on. 5 people demonstrates what a special select committee can do. But the opposition says, do as I say and not as I do, Madam Speaker. We were hardworking. Chaguanas West and I, Honorable Carney Central and I. But Madam Speaker, what I'm saying is that in answering the honorable members' debate points, the question is, are you really going to act or are you just going to talk? Mere words, Madam Speaker. Spinning wheels, as some are wont to do. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the honorable member for Tabakit made a very important submission, which I think is very useful. The honourable member asked for the government to consider in the definition of simple development in clause 3 of the bill that we reduce the lot sizes down to 3,500 square feet. And in treating with the lot sizes and being fearful of my Tobago sister for a moment right now, Madam Speaker, so passionate is she about following this debate. Madam Speaker, in looking at the 3,500 square foot position, there may be a point in time that this country has to do like the Middle East and elsewhere, where the lot sizes were shrunk, where the boundary distances are adjusted as well. Because in the other place that I have some experience and exposure, it's interesting to note that in Iraq, for instance, you build boundary to boundary because they use the concept of an inner courtyard, and you have protection for your homes, etc. The philosophy of cooperative schemes, as has happened in Turkey, where you build in corporations. So you take your cash and you build as you go. That's important as well. Tabakit asked about the affordability. And Tabakit pointed out that 75% of our people in Trinidad and Tobago are living in under $6,000 per month. Madam Speaker, we not only agree with what Tabakit said, but we acted upon it. It was this Prime Minister that made sure that that money was tax-free for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. But again, I come to an inconsistency. Because when the government, the Minister of Finance, at the direction of the Prime Minister, said people who earn $6,000 a month and below should be tax-free, the opposition said that's no big thing. Siparia stood up and said that was mamagaing the people with small change. But Tabakit comes today to acknowledge 75% of the country lives in that situation. So which is it? Which is it? Is it Siparia's philosophy or is it Tabakit's philosophy? Is it do as I say or is it do as I do, Madam Speaker? I am at a loss to follow the UNC logic. I've had an exhortation from Couva North to talk about the PNM logic, and let's do that. Madam Speaker, it is important to note that the Minister of Finance, in piloting what I consider to be a brilliant proposition for Trinidad and Tobago, the Minister of Finance recognized, and I think Tabakit may have agreed with him, I don't know, that there is a lot of money sitting in the private sector. There's a lot of land sitting in the private sector. There's a lot of state land sitting unutilized, and worse yet, at risk of squatting conditions. And the philosophy coming from this government, as Couva North has asked, what is the philosophy of the government, is already on the record. The government has proposed the initiatives and incentives for planning, for management of land, for assisting the 75% of people who live under $6,000 per month in saying, bring your land, we'll fast track it by way of approvals, as the minister under this bill and act has the power to. Secondly, we will give you the tax-free status for your development. Better yet, we will give you a price point, and if you bring in your units at the price point, you will be paid a bonus on top of the price point. So by way of example, if you're selling a unit for $700,000, you come with your land. You say, listen, I have land, I'm doing nothing, I want to develop the land. We say, okay, bring your land in. We say to the developer, you want to build homes of a particular dimension, maybe on 3,500 square feet in a developed, approved area as this bill allows. Build it, your price point is $700,000. You, the developer, you take the risk. You supervise, you take the risk of latent defect in law, so that if there's a problem in the HTC step separating, it's the contractor who built it and the owner who built it liability, not the state. You build for $700,000. The government has said, and it's been read into our finance and into our budgetary debates, we've said we'll give you a bonus on top of that. For every unit that you bring in at the price, we will give you a quantum of money to take by way of benefit. But better yet, taking 174,000 people on an HTC database, already pre-approved by TTMF and Home Mortgage Bank, we say to them, here are the people to buy your property. Now, what does that do? That shifts the risk from the state. That shifts the focus of the implementation of this law.
But you're not dealing with the multifamily units, which you're not changing the regulation.
No, because we did change the regulations. The Honourable Member saying we're not dealing with the multifamily units. The Honourable Member forgets that we amended to include the definitions of condominiums and townhouses, which are multifamily. And Madam Speaker, what I'm saying about in answering Couva North's call across the divide as to what's the PNM philosophy, here's the difference in this. The mechanism I have just described translates itself into the following. State takes the risk on the other side. The developer takes the risk. The latent defects belong to the developer. The price overruns are to be managed by the developer. The management of the distribution to be done by the developer. The state manages the risk to the developer by providing the clientele. And Madam Speaker, when you look at that, that is to change the subsidy relationship for planning and development into the state spending a subsidy of approximately $2 or $3 million per unit to a couple $100,000. And that is development and incentive done right. And Madam Speaker, the simple point inside of this equation is, if you're prepared to think outside the box, if you're prepared to make the leap of development, as Tabakit has given us an exhortation to consider, then you have to be prepared to do the whole of government approach. It requires the revenue, the bodies in the local government structures to do the work. It requires reallocation of risk. It requires following the money. It requires ensuring that there's no corruption, which Tabakit raised, inside of the Town and Country Planning Division. I recall that I recommended to Caroni Central, when he was Minister of Planning, the inclusion, and he accepted, of the bribery clause in the Parent Act. Because that is where you have to look. That requires you to have supported legislation to allow for tax transparency. And Madam Speaker, therefore, there are many moving parts to this machine. And most respectfully, whilst I respect Tabakit's contribution, whilst I welcome his exhortations in the philosophical underpinnings that he has put out, which I agree with, all of which I agree with, I think that Tabakit can do better to recognize the shortcomings of what else needed to be addressed and was not addressed, in particular by his government, in the last 5 years that they ran this country. Madam Speaker, it's been a pleasure to support the Honourable Minister of Planning in this march. I want to put on public record my gratitude to the Minister for thinking outside the box, because this is not the only bill that will make planning work. It is to be joined by the work of the Minister of National Security in making sure that there is corruption-free elements. The leap of faith is joined by actually supporting the appointment of a Commissioner of Police, which none of the members opposite wanted to do. None of the members opposite wanted to do. But Madam Speaker, I'm giving you a clear example of how one appointment, one decision can change the anticipation and hope of Trinidad and Tobago, Madam Speaker. One decision which you fight down and take pleasure to go to court to try and mash up, which you come to Parliament and refuse to support,
Madam Speaker,
results in simple development positions changing.
So, Attorney General, while I understand the fulsomeness of your argument, how comprehensive it is, I think you need to come back a bit to the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The only thing that causes me offense in this Parliament is hearing somebody call my grandfather's name, because they're not worthy to do it.
All right, so your original speaking time, member for San Fernando West, is now expired, entitled to 15 more minutes if you wish to complete.
Thank you,
Please
Madam
proceed.
Speaker. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the leap of development requires commitment and removal of old talk. It requires you to remove yourself from the position of approbating and reprobating. That's saying yes and no at the same time. Double speak, fork tongue, call it what you will, Madam Speaker. It requires sincerity. It requires recognizing that this country has been through a very difficult state and condition. It requires that in making planning development work, that taking tough decisions are required. It requires recognizing that we have a Prime Minister with a back made of titanium steel who is prepared to make decisions that other people only talk about. That other people only say, yeah, everybody knows something should have been done about something else, but nobody will do it. Like the Minister of Planning is doing right now. Like the Minister of National Security, Minister of Health, Sport, Education are doing right now. Madam Speaker, how many murders we have? If you had appointed a Commissioner of Police, might have had less. But spinning the wheel and bumbling and tumbling, as some people are wont to do in society, really don't take it there. See it. Madam Speaker, it gives me pleasure at times to poke. It gives me pleasure at times to have a little fun. It gives me pleasure at times to look at what we're really dealing with in this country. But sometimes, you really have to call a spade a spade. Correct. So, Madam Speaker, I support this legislation. There are a few small amendments to tweak up that I'm sure the Minister of Planning will address. I look forward to continuation of a debate. I thank Tabakit for allowing me the opportunity to respond largely to his submissions in what I consider to be a good debate, and I thank you.
Member for Couva North.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute on this bill. Now, Madam Speaker, firstly, I want to respond to the Attorney General and his flamboyance this afternoon here with respect to, of course, commending his colleagues, which rightly so we are all allowed to do as members of Parliament. But, Madam Speaker, I want to remind the Attorney General, and he made a particular point in response to the Member of Parliament for Tabaquite. And he spoke about the lack of personnel or workers within the local government corporations to carry out the duties effectively and efficiently to make this bill possible, the amendments, of course, possible. And I want to remind the Attorney General that there is space and there are availability of workers in this country. But the high unemployment rate perpetuated by this government, Madam Speaker, there are enough personnel who can be trained and placed into the local government corporation and boroughs to carry out this work. Many university graduates, Madam Speaker, are unemployed as I speak, and they are willing to be trained and work and be placed. And the government spoke about local government reform. For 3 years, they've been touting local government reform and coming and bringing it to the Parliament, and we await that. And this can be one such avenue for the government to bring in our young people, especially our graduates who are unemployed, and bring them in for training to fill the lack of spaces, as our Attorney General espoused earlier, and the lack of space and jobs at the local government corporations and the boroughs. So, Madam Speaker, I just wanted to flag that. Also, the Attorney General opened up this debate a little bit, Madam Speaker, and he spoke about lightening and reforming local government corporation and boroughs to that of the THA. And, Madam Speaker, that is a laugh, because I want to state that there's absolutely no transparency and accountability to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago with respect to the THA and how they run their affairs. And why I say that, Madam Speaker, because right as we sat here for Standing Finance Committee, an increase of $200 million was given to the THA for the recurrent expenditure found under the votes for vehicles, contract employment, and janitorial services.
I'm not going to let you go there, even though I do recall a member of San Fernando Mass referred to the THA model. It was within the context and the confines of the functions that we're considering here.
Yeah.
So I'll ask you to keep within
Sure.
that.
And, Madam Speaker, I will also confine it to the bill and what we are speaking about, and to say that I don't think that that is the appropriate model to fashion our local government corporations and boroughs after. I really don't think so. And the Auditor General's report is indicative of that, Madam Speaker.
Very good point.
In addition to that, Madam Speaker, the Attorney General spoke about the appointment, how the appointment of one individual, and he made reference to the Commissioner of Police, giving hope to the country and all of that, right? And that is what this bill reminded him of, giving hope to the country and the amendments to this bill. And I want to remind him, Madam Speaker, is that you can't, rush in, fools rush in. You can't rush in to say that, oh my God, crime is being dealt with holistically, because it isn't. Today, Madam Speaker, our murder rate is over 490, if I'm not mistaken. So you can't talk about kidnappings and big drug bust, and you're giving hope to the country. That's all well and good. We appreciate that. We are glad for that. But at the end of the day, the murder rate and our citizens continue to be killed mercilessly, Madam Speaker.
It's not about crime. Please move on.
So, Madam Speaker, I just wanted to flag some of those points that the Attorney General had raised, and to show that he really doesn't know what he's speaking about at the end of the day. Madam Speaker, I was reminded by my colleague from Caroni Central that during our tenure and during his tenure as Minister of Planning and Development, there was a pilot project that sought to put these mechanisms into place at the local government corporations and boroughs. And Port of Spain City Corporation, San Fernando, Tunapuna, Chaguanas, and Tobago were identified as the areas where this pilot project would have been implemented. I want to ask the Minister of Planning this afternoon, what has happened to that pilot project? Was it shelved? Is it ongoing partially? What is going on with that pilot project? We need to know, because it speaks to this bill and to the changes that took place in 2014 when this bill came to the Parliament, and to really see how it can be rolled out, or it was supposed to be rolled out effectively and efficiently. So we need to know what's going on with that pilot project, Madam Speaker. Now, I want to go back to the bill, the amendments to this bill. Clause 3, Madam Speaker, amends Section 3 of the Planning and Facilitation Bill, Development Bill, by asserting a new definition for simple development. And it made reference to billboard, advertising, online and final planning permission, not requiring a CC, change of use, residential or building development not exceeding 500 square meters, and land subdivisions comprising less than 20 plots. Simple development, Madam Speaker, and my question is, in what context these amendments speaks to simple development? What are you measuring it by? So I would like the Minister to give some clarification with respect to that, because as MPs, constituents come to your office and they're looking for approval, they want approvals, they've gone to Town and Country, they've submitted all documentation. Apart from the delays, the months of delays that we have there, then at local government corporations also there are delays with the building inspectorate. Then when it goes to the CMOH, that's another delay. And before you know it, it's years in delays for approvals for land and building. So when you speak about simple development, how long, with these amendments, how long is it going to take to really see approvals being given with these 4 amendments now to this particular clause 3? Not clause 3, but section 3, Madam Speaker. So that's very important, and I would appreciate some clarification. With respect to clause 4, Madam Speaker, clause 4 amends section 11, and it removes from the Development Control Committee the Occupational Safety and Health Agency and the CMO. And I need to ask why. Because occupational health and safety are standards. They're very, very important in this country. I remember not too long ago a famous labor leader saying that most of the buildings in Port of Spain City, it's not OSH compliant, including the new ones. They are not OSH compliant. So by what mechanism have you decided to remove the Occupational Safety and Health Agency? And the same goes for the Chief Medical Officer, the CMOH. Why the removal of the CMOH? Because they also play a very important role with respect to public health and the buildings of structures on land. So apart from the bureaucracy stymieing development, apart from that, that's another matter that I've highlighted, these offices are also very important. They play a critical role. So we need to get clarification as to why they were removed. I welcome the inclusion of local government authority, a rep from the local government authority, and of course a rep from the Ministry of Planning and Development. That goes without saying. So we need some clarification there with respect to clause 4. Again, moving on to clause 5, Madam Speaker, it amends section 13.2 with a director of planning, and we know about the qualifications. So that qualifications, in my opinion, Madam Speaker, has been watered down a bit because the experience has gone from 10 years now to 7 years. So again, why? Why a 7-year experience term as compared to what you had before, which was 10 years? Some clarification with respect to that also. Madam Speaker, clause 6, it amends section 15 of the Act, and it repeals section 2 and 3. So now we have a chief building officer who would inspect procedures for building and engineering operation, and he would forward breaches of building regulations to the National Planning Authority and then to the Chief Enforcement Officer. And you also have the introduction of the Chief Enforcement Officer, who is to take action against breaches of building registration referred to him. So, Madam Speaker, my question is, what is now left with respect to local government bodies and boroughs? What is going to happen there within their building inspectorate? Is it that the applications, when there is breaches, is it forwarded to the Chief Building Officer and the Chief Enforcement Officer, or is it that they themselves are going to be able to take action within their own local government environment? I don't understand the synergy nor the relationship a little bit with respect to how they are going to respond to approvals at the end of the day. So I need some clarity with respect to that, because we know at this point in time, when an approval goes to the CMOH, or request for approval, sorry, goes to the CMOH or goes to the building inspector, they themselves make recommendations according to their rules and standards and regulations, but I don't think it goes back to the ministry unless, there's some sort of an appeal at that level. So I'm a little bit confused, and please, if I can get some clarity with respect to that. The relationship between now the Chief Building Officer and the Chief Enforcement Officer with that of local government bodies and the boroughs. So that would be something that the Minister can clarify in her winding up. Madam Speaker, another important clause, Clause 8, which deals with the Environmental Commission. And Clause 8 would amend Section 60 of the Act by providing a person with the right to appeal to the Environmental Commission against a tree preservation order. Now, Madam Speaker, in this country, we have the tendency to not take the environment on seriously. We speak about pollution, we speak about flooding, we speak about climate change, we speak a lot about doing things that would help the environment. But with this clause, it shows now that you have given a right of appeal to persons to appeal a tree preservation order. Why, Madam Speaker? Why it is when the world, when we look around, we are looking to reduce carbon emissions, and we are looking to mitigate against climate change, and we are now giving persons the right to remove trees and to appeal this tree preservation order. I really am not in agreement or in support of this particular clause, Madam Speaker. And the thing about it is, Madam Speaker, it begs the bigger question. At the end of the day, if it is that you are going to give the right for those to appeal this tree preservation order, when you look at state-funded projects, for example, let's go to Sandals in the Boko Estate. And let's just say there's an environmental group that is, of course, lobbying for the environment and doesn't want to see acres or hectares of wetland be removed for the construction. All right, let's just say. Madam Speaker, I will ignore.
No snake.
Yeah. So let's just say that. It's a Ramsar site, by the way, Madam Speaker. The Boko Estate, it's a Ramsar site. It's protected. You have this big hotel coming in, Sandals, 900 and something rooms. And you have...
Member for Kufa North, and I'm really having some difficulty.
It's a little bit angsty.
I'd ask all members to observe Standing Order 53 and listen in silence. Please continue, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I'm trying to drive my point home. So you now have this right of appeal for the tree preservation order. You have this big Sandals coming in to build 900 rooms on the Boko Estate. It's a Ramsar site. It's protected. You have environmental groups, Tobago environmental groups that are up in arms. They want to know, we all want to know, we are seeking clarity. We want to know how many hectares of wetlands are going to be removed. And again, you have to look at the long-standing negative impact on the environment with respect to that. This now makes it easier, Madam Speaker, for these projects to happen without consideration or due consideration in terms of a lobby group, in terms of protecting the environment. It now gives it another avenue to make it happen quickly, because you now have the right of appeal. And that is something that is very important. It's the same with the project, the Manzalina Highway. That highway goes through a protected forest reserve. You have the Aripo savannas, the infamous Aripo savannas, that every UWI student like myself who studied and did environmental studies would have gone into the Aripo savannas on field studies. We know the importance of it, and yet still you have this highway traversing through the forest, and there is, of course, no recourse for the environmental groups or for protecting and preserving the environment. It's always about development before protecting the environment, and that is why as a country, we will continue to suffer when we ignore the effects of climate change. And that is why, as a country, when we have to spend millions of dollars to flood victims, to compensate flood victims, because of this global shift in our climate and the severity at which now flooding is happening and how frequently it is happening, Madam Speaker. So it's like spinning a top in mud and not getting anywhere, because every time you have heavy rainfall, you have flooding now. I tell you, there are some people, Madam Speaker, within my constituency, when, you know, they see thunderclouds, they are frightened, because as soon as rainfall, some of them gets flooded out. So it's really, really important to look at the bigger picture at the end of the day. And I really think that this Clause 8 is not serving the best interests of Trinidad and Tobago. I think it makes it easier for rushed and hurried development without a thought. Madam Speaker, in addition to that, there was one other little point that I wanted to flag, and that was, of course, the Development Committee. Again, I said before that I was kind of concerned about the removal of the OSH personnel, the rep, and the CMOH. But a little question about the ministry rep. And we all know how it goes in this country. And the Development Committee will now have a ministry rep, rightly so. But then again, state-funded projects that, you know, where the environment can be hampered. What is going to happen there, Madam Speaker? And I say no more. I stop right there. At the end of the day, we need to be very aware, citizens. You know, and the AG is mumbling across the floor. And it never really serves his best interest to do that. It never, because, Madam Speaker, and I want to go back to what he said earlier. He spoke about crime and giving hope to the country. Madam Speaker, what kind of confidence we have, or we can say we have in this Attorney General when you water down every piece of legislation that needs a special majority that comes here?
I will take it that you're just caught up in your passion about the environment.
Yes.
Please come back to the bill.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. So the Attorney General needs to be a little cognizant of the reputation that he's creating out there for himself. All right? The environment is very, very important, Madam Speaker. I want to reiterate that this Clause 8 would not help in any particular way. Madam Speaker, Clause 12 of the Act. Clause 12 of the Act would amend Section 95 by repealing Section 1G and H. And that is, of course, dealing with failure to comply with the provisions of any compliance notice, compliance order, or development repair order, which is extensively addressed under Sections 54 and 57. Madam Speaker, I hope that this is, of course, implemented strictly within local government corporations and also at the ministry level, because we have a lot of citizens who breach rules and regulations of building codes and otherwise. And therefore, it's very, very important that this particular Clause 12 is strictly implemented so that we can, you know, move properly with respect to development, move forward properly with respect to development. Madam Speaker, in addition to that, I also wanted to say that in this country, for many, many years, we have experienced, and successive governments, we have experienced, in some instances, the willpower to really implement holistically and 100% to see proper development in this country. And Madam Speaker, I think with this government, it's a little worse in terms of attitude, in terms of application. And these amendments, while it may assist the parent legislation in terms of development and planning, it is really left to be seen when it is implemented and how well it works. Again, I want to make an appeal with respect to the pilot project that we would have implemented during our tenure, and to ask whether or not it is ongoing, and to even make another appeal to the minister that if it isn't, to please implement, and let's see how effectively it works. Because all of this legislation coming to this parliament today would be for naught if it's not implemented properly, and we don't see how it works as a country. So we won't know what to do, what to come back to the House with, what to change after 10, 15 years, because in this country it takes a long time to change legislation and to how it is our system is. So, Madam Speaker, with those few words, I thank you.
Member for Tobago West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to make a short contribution to this discussion today as we seek to further improve the Planning and Facilitation Bill. Now, Madam Speaker, I consider this legislation to be, or the amendments being made to this legislation to be very important. Many of the speakers before me would have spoken about the fact that our tongue and country legislation had been around for at least 50 years, and we would have made a first attempt to improve that legislation in the year 2014. At that point in time, I was an opposition senator, Madam Speaker, and I remember the opposition raising several concerns related to the legislation that was brought before the House. Madam Speaker, especially the Tobago House of Assembly had some interesting and important amendments which we would have liked to see. We would have had a first debate in the Senate, and we spent at least 3 days or so in the Planning Committee, and we got some cooperation from the government on some matters. And I think that we made good leaps as it relates to improving the then legislation, but there were some items that were left out. And I think that it is important, it is critical that we return to the House under this minister, under this government, to improve the legislation in the best interest of development of Trinidad and Tobago. We could all attest that the legislation that we would have previously had been archaic, and the rules and regulations had been poorly enforced and poorly implemented. We are a small island nation state as it relates to our size, and we must admit that our land resources, or all resources, are limited and infinite. It is therefore critical that we manage our resources in a responsible and strategic manner, and that we do so in our wisdom. We do all in our wisdom and our power to protect and preserve this limited resource that we do have. Now, Madam Speaker, I am from Tobago, a very small land space of 116 square miles, and we boast of being clean, green, safe, and serene. And I think that this legislation would go a long way for ensuring a better quality of life for the residents of Tobago as it relates to housing, agriculture, green spaces, recreational facilities, housing, the management of public utilities, infrastructure, and so on. And it would make Tobago and Trinidad more attractive and more competitive as a destination as it relates to tourism, protecting our forests, our watercourses, the watersheds, the marine resources, and even helping us to develop into a proper modern society. Madam Speaker, this planning legislation would go a long way in addressing our social, economic, and environmental concerns in a comprehensive way. It helps to strike a balance between competing demands and would help us to achieve maximizing the use of our national space, not just land, Madam Speaker, because we are also speaking about air and resources and everything that goes into orderly development or rational development for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, Madam Speaker, I want to just zone in a little bit on the devolution of powers, or the delegation of authorities, of authority that is being undertaken in these new amendments before us today. They may seem simple, Madam Speaker, but I think that they are important as it relates to this government's thrust and drive for bringing government closer to the people and for local government reform. Now, it gives our local government agencies greater influence over planning and development of the places for which they are responsible. I think that this is a major step in encouraging devolution and decentralization as it relates to the administration of our business as government and local government. It brings the planning function closer to home. Now, as I said before, Madam Speaker, I'm from Tobago, West Tobagonian. And Tobagonian people, we love land. We are a land-loving people, as we like to say. We understand that the space over which we are responsible, it's a very limited land space. So it's important that all our development takes place in a proper fashion. Now, in the past, the Tobago House of Assembly, or should I say Tobago, would have had to depend very heavily on central government and central government bodies for the planning function. Even though Schedule 5 of the Tobago House of Assembly Act speaks to the Tobago House of Assembly having responsibility for the planning function in Tobago. But for as long as we could remember, the Tobagoan or people who are developing in Tobago had to seek permission from tongue and country planning in Trinidad. If you want to put a drain on your piece of land, if you want to subdivide a piece of land, to share a piece of land with a brother, sister, or a child, we would have had to fill out this application and send it to the central government body in Trinidad. And oftentimes you would find people sitting in Trinidad telling you or responding to your request saying, no, you can't do this here, or you can't establish this development here because that is agricultural land. Or you cannot build this drain here because we don't see it fit. They have never seen the land, never paid it a visit, Madam Speaker, but had the right and the responsibility to make these decisions from Trinidad, even though the planning function on pen and paper, or should I say in Schedule 5, had been the responsibility of the Tobago House of Assembly. So we welcome this development to bring the planning function closer to the people of Tobago and to give the Tobago House of Assembly the opportunity and the responsibility to deliberate over these applications. Now, Madam Speaker, I can speak about an experience that's close to my heart. I have an uncle who a couple years ago decided to give to my sisters and I a piece of land. And it was 4.5 lots, or a little over half acre. So we approached the Ministry of Planning to get a subdivision. And there, in submitting the application, the technical staff or the staff of Tongue and Country Planning Unit in Tobago will have said this application would not be accepted, it would be declined, but you have to wait 6 weeks to receive the letter from Tongue and Country in Trinidad. And when you receive that letter after 6 weeks, we then had to write to the minister asking for the matter to be appealed. Now, this is in submitting the application. So we know from the onset that the application would be declined, but you had to wait 6 weeks in order to get a response. That is to allow for the information to be transferred to Trinidad and for deliberation to happen and for them to respond. And then we write to the minister and wait again for the appellate body to sit and for a visit from the technical staff in Trinidad to visit Tobago to confirm that you're not able to subdivide this piece of land or to put this drain. And this speaks, Madam Speaker, to this desire for internal self-government, because a lot of people don't understand what we mean by internal self-government and wanting to be in charge of our own business in Tobago. Something as simple as dividing, separating a piece of land, even putting a drain or a new structure on a piece of land that belongs to you as a family, we had to report to Trinidad and ask for permission from Trinidad. So as simple as it may seem, because I had the opportunity to review the debate that took place in 2014 and to review the response of the member for Caroni Central that said that the changes or the amendments that are being proposed are minor. as simple as it seems, this means a lot for the people of Tobago, because the ride to, or the journey to the National Planning Authority is not a yellow band or a red band maxi ride. For us, it's getting on a plane or a boat and coming to Trinidad and waiting for these responses. So I lost my... No, I lost my page, but Madam Speaker, what is important to us is the ability to deliberate over our own matters as it relates to land, because land is so close to us. Madam Speaker, Clause 10 of the legislation seeks to amend Section 89, Clause 89 of the legislation, and in that clause that is being proposed by the changes that were made, that are being presented by our Minister of Planning here today, Madam Speaker, gives the Tobago House of Assembly the ability to appeal by simply adding planning authority to the National Planning Authority, as it relates to giving the ability to appeal. That allows the Tobago House of Assembly to not just consider or process applications, but rather than have to send the matters to be appealed to the national body and then from the national body to the Environmental Commission. The Environmental Commission and the Tobago House of Assembly can now interact directly, making that a seamless process for the people of Tobago. And I think that goes a long way in improving the standard of living, the way the environment for doing business in Tobago and for Tobagoanians. Because this is not just about building new structures or the separation of land or housing and these simple matters. This speaks to our ability to get involved in entrepreneurship and business development for those who want to do accommodation development and other development, that we can do these things in Tobago without that lengthy period and that going back and forth between Trinidad and Tobago and waiting on the permission of the minister or some entity in Trinidad. Over the years, these convoluted and confusing processes had been very difficult for us as Tobagoanians, because it had created a false demand for housing in Tobago. And I'll explain why, Madam Speaker. Because you're having difficulties with tongue and country planning to get approval to face the bank so that you could build a home, instead of going through all of that back and forth, you just apply to the Division of Housing and Settlements. I live in the hospital, I want a house. So, Madam Speaker, there are people asking for houses that don't need houses from the Division of Housing in Tobago. But because they're unable to treat with these matters with the tongue and country planning to get their paperwork to go to the bank, they end up going to the House of Assembly and requesting housing in Tobago. So that is just one example. I am pleased, Madam Speaker, by taking this power out of the hands of the minister for the appeal, because in the past you had to write to the minister. And I remember in this house, I was on the other side at that time, literally stalking the then Minister of Planning, because I had this matter where we had to appeal to try to get the land subdivided, and it was never done. But that is just an example of the kind of trouble that we had to go through as Tobagoanians. I was not as lucky as Pastor Basdio from Tabokit, who had his MP pursue the matter on his behalf. We didn't have that good representation at that point in time. That's the reason I'm here now. So we now get the opportunity to interact with directly, not going through a national body, with the Environmental Commission. And that power is now taken from the minister and given to the Environmental Commission, and the planning authorities in Tobago, in the municipal corporations, could interact and to get the business done more expeditiously. And I'm happy that it's the Environmental Commission, and we are getting the Environmental Commission more involved in the process. It brings me to that point of, because it's not just about building buildings, it's also about proper management of our airspace, proper management of our marine resources and so on. And that brings me to this matter of sandals that was raised by the member for Couva South. You know, Madam Speaker, it is unbelievable how so many of our members across the floor claim to love Tobago so much, but every opportunity this member gets, she berates Tobago and the Tobago House of Assembly. What kind of love is that, Madam Speaker? So, but Madam Speaker, the member raised an important matter as it relates to sandals, that we're going to be building sandals on this environmentally protected area. And it makes me wonder, does the member even know where is the proposed piece of site, the proposed site for sandals? No. Madam Speaker, they continue to spread these half-truths about building on the mangrove. It doesn't make any sense, and building on no man's land. Does she even know where no man's land is and what and where is Buku Estate? Madam Speaker, I grew up in Tobago. Tobago West is my constituency. Buku Estate is in my constituency, and for years that was owned by Clico and Angostura and so on. There was a gate there, and the people of Tobago couldn't have access to that piece of land. It's a huge piece of land. It is not a mangrove. So, Madam Speaker, I want the members opposite, especially the member from Couva South, to do the research, Couva North, to do the research and educate themselves if you want to speak about the people of Tobago and on behalf of the people of Tobago. And I want to go further in, because in their efforts to berate the whole sandals project,
Derail it.
it's going to be derailed if they continue in that light. But the people of Tobago will not allow that, because we understand how important this project is for our economic development. And I want to further ask, Madam Speaker, if not that, what is your alternative plan for Tobago's economic development? Nothing. They have proposed nothing, but are trying to raise.
All right, please. Member for Tobago West.
Yes, Madam Speaker. So for years, we have been looking at this kind of development for Tobago, and I'm pleased that the Tobago House of Assembly, just like the municipal corporations, under the watch of the Minister of Planning, from the time we got into government, we ensured that the municipal corporations were up to date with their plans. Because this thing is a whole system. It has to be comprehensive. It has to come together. And the Tobago House of Assembly did not just develop the comprehensive plan for Tobago Part 1. We did comprehensive plan for Tobago Part 2. So there is a plan, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, I remember years of hoping to attract an international brand, one like sandals, when I returned to Trinidad and Tobago from school abroad in 2008. Up to 2012, we were trying to attract sandals. And now we have the opportunity to do so, and this government is moving full speed ahead with the support of Tobago, no matter who is trying to scuttle it. And I want to raise, Madam Speaker, because there are some people who have joined with members opposite in trying to scuttle the sandals project, Madam Speaker. Even some people in Tobago who claim to care about the environment, who they themselves saying sandals is going to damage the sea and going to damage all this stuff, Madam Speaker. And they themselves up in Charlottesville, up in the countryside, have a 2x2 hotel on the beach in Charlottesville with the wastewater going out into the water. How about that? So, Madam Speaker, these are things that the Environmental Commission need to look into even now.
Excrement.
And I want to go further, Madam Speaker, to say that eco-friendly environment, where we seek to protect the environment and conserve the environment, it doesn't mean don't build on the land.
Exactly.
It means build in an eco-friendly way. There are so many other countries within the Caribbean and with similar topography and geographical characteristics like Trinidad and Tobago that have taken advantage of tourism, that have built hotels and so on to take advantage of those resources. And that is what proper economic development is about. You build and you make proper use of what you have while you protect the environment. That is what technology is all about. So that back in the day, archaic thinking that is coming from opposite, we do not support, Madam Speaker. We are a forward-thinking people. And Madam Speaker, we are at the cusp of doing great things in Tobago, from the expansion of the airport. That is a part of our development plan, and Tobago is about to shoot off. We have the wastewater project taking place. We have improved electricity projects taking place. We just added 20 megawatts to the Cove Eco-Industrial Park. And as I mentioned, Cove Eco-Industrial Park, Madam Speaker, the member for Couva North, would have mentioned, why do we even have to appear here in order to appeal, right? Why is this a part of the proposed amendment to be given the permission to appeal a tree development that is protected? Tree conservation. Thank you, Member for Carolina East. And I remember, Madam Speaker, a couple of years ago, I was a director on the Cove Eco-Industrial Park Board. And I remember coming to this house and speaking about a problem that we were having, where Town and Country Planning gave...
So I overrule you, Naparima. The member is talking about an amendment in the bill which deals with the tree conservation order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The tree that allow you to appeal the tree conservation order. And Madam Speaker, while I was a director there, I remember that Town and Country Planning gave an order to the Cove Eco-Industrial Park to maintain a tree buffer on the Eco-Industrial Park. And at that point in time, Tech in Tobago were removing the trees and putting light posts there. And we made several applications to the government. We cried out to the government, the then government, several petitions to the government asking them to intervene. And at that point in time, there were many state enterprises that were laws unto themselves. And any state enterprise that was disrespecting the Tobago House of Assembly had the opportunity to do so freely because they were in government, Madam Speaker. And I remember making several petitions from Cove asking them, you've given us an order to have this tree conservation area protected, and you gave. And the minister then of Public Utilities came to this house and read out a number for an order given by the same Town and Country Planning that gave Tech the ability to put up the light post there. So, Madam Speaker, it has to be in sync. And I'm happy that the Environmental Commission is now involved and taking care of these appeals, so we wouldn't have to treat with the political interference or the political protection of those who are doing wrong. So, Madam Speaker, I think that this is forward-thinking legislation. I am happy that it involves all stakeholders and give all stakeholders an opportunity to influence the process. And I am very, very much excited about the powers being delegated to the Tobago House of Assembly to manage its own affairs. And this is the spirit of this government, to honor the intent and the spirit of the Tobago House of Assembly Act, giving to the people of Tobago internal self-government and the right to run their own business and to be man in their own in their own land, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker,
the member is anticipating.
Is that 48-1?
No, stand up on 48-1, Madam Speaker. Relevance.
Please continue, Member for Tobago.
Madam Speaker, I'm not sure that the member read the bill, but the bill speaks in depth about devolution and decentralization, delegation of authority, and it mentions the Tobago House of Assembly as a planning authority, just like the municipal corporations. And this is the thrust and the drive of this government to ensure that we bring government closer to the people. We are a people-centered type of government, Madam Speaker, and I am just pleased to be a part of this, especially as we don't wait for the Internal Self-Government Act to be passed. But bit by bit, in every piece of legislation, we start extending and giving that authority to the people of Tobago, because it has been a long time coming. And under this government, you're going to get the support of all of us. And I hope the opposition too to make it happen. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Member for Kamuta Mansinala.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, just to
to speak about what Member for Tobago West had indicated. I just want to, before I reach there, I just want to commend highly Member for Caroni Central, Member for Tabakit, Member for Couva North, who gave sterling contributions to this bill. And I want to emphasize how important the contributions on this side must be taken in light of. And it is this. First of all, in response to the Attorney General, when the Attorney General was highlighting the member for Tabakit's contribution, the member for Tabakit is a very experienced land developer. He's very experienced in local government. He's very experienced in everything that he brings about. And he's very thorough, and he's very experienced, and he's also very knowledgeable about what he speaks about. And therefore, and he was able to convey how land usage can be, in fact, given the best results and utilized in a way that even the poorer, the indigent can, in fact, access housing. And therefore, I think that if this government is very serious about implementing laws that will impact upon the country and to the benefit of the citizens, I think it is worthy to take the suggestions that have been proffered by my colleague. And just to add to what Member for Tobago West, who has disappeared, but I speak through you, Madam Speaker. Member for Tobago West indicated that, she spoke about the bill as it relates to maximizing space and the rationale for development, and spoke about it. And I have to say, given the limited space in Trinidad and Tobago, we must understand that land doesn't grow. And therefore, I think that, it is important for us to really ask whether, again, coming back, whether approval for multiple family units on a 5,000 square foot lot is being given by the town and country. And since this was approved during our tenure, our administration and the current government also spoke about it in 2017 budget of making more building space available on a single lot. So is this being, in fact, applied? And this is the question that we're asking. I'm asking questions. Also, just to respond again to Member for Tobago West, member said that this bill will help the THA in doing so much things, but the THA has all the authority already. So therefore it does not really need any more authority. All this bill, the clause 89, really speaks to is giving the THA an ability to be able to bring a request, and therefore it is important for Tobago West to really read the bill, because we have read it on this side. So, again, in responding to Attorney General indicated that he's speaking about the developer, allowing the developer to take the risk, reallocation of risks, following the money, and then it came about one appointment and one decision could impact. I'm asking, and really I'm asking on behalf of my constituents, and this one decision to change the whole dynamics of the building inspector, the chief enforcement officer, and the director. How would this decision impact upon Farm Road? How would it impact upon, how we move forward with the decisions that are being implemented now, which are very concerning to the population? The removal, and I don't want to go into the removal of the OSHA and the CMOH. How will that impact, especially when it is we have environmental concerns taking place right now? And I'm speaking on behalf of my constituents, because my constituents are very concerned. We have development taking place, Madam Speaker, in Sandy Grande, and there are water courses that are being diverted, the river being cut and sent elsewhere, and because of it there has been high incidences of flooding. Will this bill, because this is what the constituents are asking, will this bill impact upon what is happening now? Will it stop the abuse of the land development that is taking place, not just in my constituency, but throughout Trinidad and Tobago?
So these are the concerns that we are asking, really and truly, Madam Speaker. And I'm asking, again, why change the qualifications for these three positions? Director of Planning, the Chief Building Officer, Chief Enforcement Officer. And I further ask why these applicants must have or must be accredited with the Trinidad and Tobago Council for Urban and Regional Planners. Why must they be accredited by this council? You know, so the questions that I'm asking on behalf of my constituents, how does one apply to be accredited? Because there may be persons who are interested in applying for the job. So how do you apply to be accredited to this council? You know, what is the process? How long does it take to be accredited? Is there an appeal board? Should one be denied accreditation? So if the member for Aruka Maloney can answer these questions or answer it to the population, it would really assist in asking how this bill will impact. Because at the end of the day, the constituents, the people are asking, how does this bill make it easier for me? I'm listening and I'm hearing about the change of use. I heard member for W. O'Meara speaking earlier. A member indicated, well, you know, we have this simple planning, the simple development, it changed, and you know, you're speaking about billboards, and you're speaking about change of use, and that was it. Had not member for Tabakit spoken, we would have understood exactly what that meant. So therefore, this is indicative that members on the other side are not clear on what this bill is saying. And so for my constituents, they are concerned. Why? Because my area is predominantly agricultural. And so therefore, they want to know, does the change of use apply to change of land use in terms of agriculture to residential? And therefore, they don't know. Do they have to apply? Would it be, is it that this bill will allow for the state to make it easier for the state to get change of use, but more difficult for private entities and commercial and so forth? So the question is, what are the value and the validity of the amendments that are being brought here for the little man on the street who apply to get change of use just like anyone else? It's not only developers and so forth, as it would be implied by the member for San Fernando West. So again, the minister needs to explain why the Trinidad and Tobago Council of Planners is being brought into these amendments, and what is the justification when the rules by which you can become a member are not clear and transparent. That is very important for us on this side to understand that. I was listening again to a member for W. O'Meara, and the member spoke specifically about the three positions, you know, opening up and expanding. The words were expanding. And then he said, you know, the jobs become available. And I was wondering, there are only 3 positions. How many persons can really apply for them? So I think it's important for us to be clear that it's the positions that we're looking at. And again, I have concerns as to why it is being done this way. I am only articulating the concerns of my constituents. I'm not going to speak about Clause 8 because I think that has been properly ventilated by our side. And I'm going to speak about Clause 10. It says that the bill will amend Section 89(1) of the Planning and Facilitation of Development Act by providing the Environmental Commission with the power to exercise jurisdiction over appeals of decisions made by a planning authority. And I'm asking, is there a time frame in which a person shall apply? And is there a time frame in which a person can, in fact, receive a response so that, you know, that the appeals are not just pie in the sky changes in the clause? And my question again also for Clause 12, the offenses and penalties of the bill, which amends Section 95(1) by deleting paragraphs G and H. And I'm asking, it says, failure to comply with the provision of any development repair order or causing or permitting a contravention of the order to occur or to continue. And it continues, failure to comply with any order made by the chief building officer or an inspector under the part okay. I'm asking the question, you know, developers right now divert watercourses, etc. And will this decision be retroactive? Because if it is retroactive, I can see merit in it because of the fact that there are too many things that are happening without the proper, without the authorities taking the proper checks and balances to prevent such abuse of power. You know, and I know the various members spoke about abuse of power. We don't want the abuse of power. We want to be able to have proper checks and balances in place and so forth. And I ask the question, you know, the population will only follow our lead as leaders. And if we as leaders disobey different laws that are in place, they fail to comply with laws, what do we expect the population to do? You know, they will not do any better than what we, so we have to set the example. We must set the example and do what is right. And when we do wrong, we need to apologize. And there's nothing wrong with us apologizing. As a matter of fact, I think the nation needs to hear a lot of our leaders apologize because of the fact that a lot of wrongdoing is taking place and no one is taking a responsibility for it. And so putting in laws and amending it accordingly and watering down so that you can get it to suit whatever it is you want does not do the country any good. As a matter of fact, people look at us and they ask us the question, what are we here as parliamentarians and legislators for? Because the fact that a lot of the things that are happening are done arbitrarily, and this must not be the appearance of how we operate in this parliament. This parliament is a hallowed house and it must be respected and given it due respect. And so I don't want to stay too long on it because I don't want to be repetitive in what my members have indicated. But again, we need to ask why it is we have there are flooding and constituency issues that need to be raised, and this.
I heard you say, and I think that was a very good comment about not wanting to be repetitive. I'm sure you are minded by Standing Order 55-1B. So continue, but be guided.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, so we need to know how proactive, how vigilant, how attentive, how watchful, how cautious, how alert our institutions charged with the responsibility of protecting and safeguarding our environment. How aggressive are these institutions and those charged with the responsibility of shielding, defending, and guarding our priceless environment from the destructive nature of human behavior? Because they protect it from it, we have to protect it from us, you know, and so that's why we are here, so that we can protect ourselves as well. And so if I may answer the question myself, it is abundantly clear that the institutions and those whose responsibility it is to safeguard our natural environment have fallen down on the job. And therefore, we need to ensure that whatever we do here is not manipulated by the politics and by politicians, and it is not armstronged into giving green light for development because somebody wants it. It must be done with proper planning and with proper order and with a future in mind. And that's what the PP government did, Madam Speaker, when we implemented programs and policies. It was always with a plan and with an understanding. It was to safeguard the future and to protect our inheritance, to protect our patrimony. We're not seeing that today. And therefore, we cannot sit idly by as parliamentarians and legislators and allow the natural environment to be shaped by our whims and fancy. It cannot be business as usual, or the consequences will be grave, just as we witnessed firsthand just recently. And so it is important for us to respect this. I don't understand the fact that we have this the protection of our trees, you know, and then you could have someone just, you know, come out and ask for it to be removed. You know, on what guidance, what authority? Is there something that is going to be, is there a guiding line that is going to allow for a person to actually make an appeal and for that appeal to be heard on what grounds? Is there any framework to give guidance to that? And so I think all those things are very important so that when we stand to make law, that it is in fact good, it is in fact beneficial, and in fact that we have thought out of the consequences. And with those few words, Madam Speaker, I do thank you.
Honourable members, it's now 4:28:48. Would now be a convenient time for you? I think so. So that I think we'll take the suspension now, and we will resume at 5 o'clock. This House is now suspended. We'll resume at 5.